Okay, hello guys. I hope if you celebrated Christmas, you had a Merry Christmas. If you celebrated Hanukkah, you had a Happy Hanukkah. Any other holidays or festivities, the winter solstice, I hope you had a nice one. And we're going toward the new year, at least of the Gregorian calendar. So 2026, let's hope that it's a very wonderful year. Um, and and then Chinese New Year, of course, will follow not so far on its heels. But today, I want to share a little bit with you about some things that I've learned about the second chapter of the Dao De Jing in our 81 months of the Dao De Jing project. So, as you know, January is quickly approaching. Although I have a funny feeling there may be one more video, perhaps in chapter two. Um, we just finished up our classes, and I wanted to get my feet under me this month because I felt like there needed to be a little bit more clarity about some things about this chapter before I started blabbing about it in public too much. We've looked a little bit at what Nan Huai Qin says, we've made a sort of a basic summary of the chapter, but today I want to look at some particular ideas. Um, so we haven't really talked about the comparisons that much. We've talked a little bit about the start of the chapter, but we haven't talked that much about the non-being and being, high and low, etc. Right. So today, I had always wondered, for a long time, what certain things meant inside of the comparison. So let's just go through the list here. Okay, this is from the website Wuqian Yan 5000 YAN, which is a modern website dealing with the Dao De Jing and annotating it, um, putting together different sources to try to understand the Dao De Jing. Okay, so here's the comparisons. Yo wu xiang sheng, right? So being and non-being are mutually generated. Nan yi xiang cheng, right? Difficulty and ease are mutually compose each other or mutually succeed. Chang duan xiang xing, so long and short make up each other's form. Gao xia xiang ying, so high and low mutually fill each other. Now the one that I usually read is xiang qing, which means they rest on each other. Yin sheng xiang he, tone and sound, they mutually create harmony. Qian hou xiang sui, so before and after mutually follow each other. It could also be front and back mutually follow each other. Heng ye, so that's eternal. Okay, so when we look at this passage, lots of them are just pretty off the bat, pretty easy. So you wu xiang xiang, right? Being and non-being are mutually generated. Just look back at chapter one of the Dao De Jing, right? You'll see that this is the premise of chapter one actually. Nan yi xiang cheng, right? Difficulty and ease mutually, create a like form basically. So in that regard, you can understand, right? That which was once difficult for you, but that you mastered, became easy, and something which seemed easy at first became difficult as you understood more about it, right? It seems not so difficult to understand. It may maybe more applications than that, but that's the basic idea. Chang duan xiang xing, right? Long and short, they both make up uh, form. Another way that they talk about xiang jiao, right? They can be compared against each other, right? They make up comparison. It's another way to say it. So that one's obvious. Gao xia xiang ying, upper and lower fill each other. But another one is xiang qing, right? They lean on each other, they rest on each other. Okay, again, it makes sense. You put something on a table and it rests on the table. Yin xiang xiang he. I always thought yin and sheng, right? They're talking about terms, like tonal terms, but I always thought they're probably about musical tones and not about linguistic tones. And so the Wu Qian Yan website has confirmed this, and it's made it make a little bit more sense for me. And so I thought this would be a good one to share about today. Okay, so they say sheng in ancient Chinese music is a tone that has no cadence attached to it. So it's a simple tone with no cadence attached to it. And then yin is a complex tone that has cadence attached to it. So, in other words, when you're playing music, right, music is a combination of simple tones and also complex tones, and they come together to form to make a musical motif or a musical scale or musical idea. And so that was really useful for me to find that in the annotation on the Wuqianyan website, because now I understand a little bit better what the comment is getting at, right? Basically, it's saying, well, when you put different tones together in certain ways, you get musical harmony, right? So that makes a lot of sense. I'm sure there's more to it than that, and I never studied, ancient Chinese music. I studied a little bit of medieval Chinese music, but that is, operating on a pentatonic system. Ancient Chinese music was operating on a 12-tone system, and it's got its own theory that I have a really hard time getting my head around. So I'm not sure that I'll be pursuing this idea so much farther than this, but it was useful anyway, just to get some sort of general idea of what Lao Tzu might be talking about. Okay, so Qianhou Xiang Sui. So the authors of this commentary in the Wu Qianyan website, they believe that Qian and Hou are before and after, but it could also be front and back, right? But they're saying things happen in a certain order, right? That's the basic idea. So then why don't we just finish out the chapter here? So they made some other comments. So 是以相缘处无为之时. So the sage stays in the activities of non-action. So what they said here is that this person who engages in the sage, there's an essential difference between the Laozi's conception of the sage and the Confucian conception of the sage. And so what they claim on the Wu Qianyan website is that Laozi's idea of the sage is a person whose body is the same as the Tao, right? So they embody the Tao, in other words. Whereas the Confucian sage is a person who has the Tao, right? Who carries the Tao. And so those two things are fundamentally different suppositions. And what they say is basically the person who embodies the Tao understands the Tao is the origin of all things, so sees all things as equal and doesn't need to meddle in their affairs, right? That's the approximate basic idea there. Xing bu yan zhi jiao, right? So carrying out the teaching with no words, right? So in other words, the Tao teaches by example, so the very high level person also teaches by example, right? But teach here, not necessarily teach, okay? Because teach, as I mentioned before, this could also be, it could mean they carry out the doctrine without words, right? So that person is able to govern without having to indoctrinate, so to speak, right? So that's another possibility, and that would be consonant with chapter 5, for instance, right, which also talks about similar ideas, right? Not excessively teaching the people, because people have a tendency to misinterpret words and make more of them than were actually meant, and so on and so forth, right? Okay, then it says 万物作而复始. Now this is really different from the versions of the Dao De Jing I'm familiar with. I'm used to 万物作言而不辞. So that one, it means the myriad beings keep going, almost like exclamation mark, and they never say goodbye or they never retire, right? So what it means is things just keep going, right? The world just keeps on turning, right? This one, 万物作而复始. So a literal translation, the myriad beings keep going, and parentheses the sage, end parentheses, does not begin. But here they say that sure means to meddle, right? To get in the way of, to meddle in the affairs of. So the myriad beings keep going, and the sage, implied in parentheses, doesn't meddle in their affairs, right? The sage allows them to do their thing and governs subtly through non-action. But, actually non-action, if you compare against chapter, I think 25, right? Doesn't it say, let me see, 又无混成先天地生, right? So 又无, there was something, 混成, mixed and already formed, 先天地, before heaven and earth, 生, were generated, right? There was something mixed and already formed before heaven and earth were generated. In other words, the activity of the Tao is in non-action, but non-action carries with it the latent potential of activity, right? Non-being carries within it the latent potential of being, and being sprouts from within non-being, and action sprouts from within non-action, right? So ultimately, the action of non-action is called wei wu wei, right? Acting without acting, or wu bu wei. Nothing is not acted on, or if we don't place it as a double negative, right? Everything is acted on. That's the power of the Tao, which spreads out and which floods reality, right? So that's the sort of, I think, the premise, is when engaging in that doctrine without words, right? That non-action event, not meddling in the affairs of things, but it still has the sage still has a tremendously strong effect because that person uses the mysterious virtue of the Tao to get their job done, right? Okay, so generated and not having. So shang fuyo. Okay, so I'd been reading in the past in other variations that this would be referring to the myriad beings being generated and not owning their birth, right? So shang means birth, er means and, fu means does not, yo means to have. So the myriad beings are born and don't own their birth. But it looks like in this one, what they're saying is it's this the myriad beings are generated and the sage doesn't take ownership of them. Wei are fu sure, right? So their action can't be relied on. And then gongcheng er fuju, when his or her work is achieved, they do not rest in their works. Fu wei fuju, those who do not rest in their works, shi yi bu chu, then they never have to leave, right? So anyway, the general reading that I get from this, looking here, there's not that huge difference with other versions, but what it looks like to me is that in other versions, it looks like the activities of the sage and the activities of the myriad are kind of mixed up in the chapter, and it's not always clear who we're talking about. Whereas this one, it tries to make it look like we're talking about what the sage does in relation to the myriad, and that's good. It's a very straightforward treatment of the chapter. But you can also consider that having a really straightforward treatment of the chapter where you get a definitive meaning might actually take away some of the benefit from the Dao De Jing. So one of the reasons why I like comparing across different texts and different genres in order to try to get more meaning out of the text, to be able to have more choices about what I can do with it, right? Because ideally this can help me to have a more enjoyable life. Okay, so that's the basic thing. I mean, I got lots and lots of text here, right? I got a whole big document, but we covered that in class today for the 4th class, and I don't want to read through it again. So I hope that you found this video useful, and if you're interested in taking any of the classes, I will drop the links in the description below, and you can check them out. We've done chapters 1 and 2 so far. I will put out an ad for chapter 3 after the new year. I typically don't create courses or this kind of thing before the new year. One of the reasons is I'd like to have a little bit of time off, and one of the other reasons is because I don't want to, I don't know, I'd like everybody to have a little bit of time off, to be honest. But if you're interested in checking it out, the link is in the description. Okay, see you pretty soon with another one, maybe from chapter 2, but we're going to start moving on to chapter 3 in January, which is exciting because we go deeper into this activity of non-action and emptying the heart and filling the belly and all those cool things, many of which are used in meditation practice, so I feel right at home. Okay, see you soon.